This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on quite a project. We're looking at the history of modern Western philosophy, but maybe not how you expect.
Right. We're framing it using this really evocative metaphor, the rise, fall, and maybe even the rebuilding of the House of Reason and Faith.
It's this idea that philosophers weren't just, thinking abstract thoughts. They were actively trying to build a structure, a system, a safe place for truth, especially after the medieval world started to crumble.
Exactly. So this deep dive is going to be a kind of whirlwind tour, maybe a shortcut across 4 centuries. We'll start with Descartes trying to build that first shelter.
Then we'll see how it got expanded, wrecked by thinkers like Nietzsche, and then, what's being built now in the 21st century and what that means politically.
Should be interesting.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. 17th century, it's chaos, right? Religious wars, the whole Galileo affair.
Total intellectual upheaval. The old certainties were just gone. And you had reason and faith basically at war with each other. They seemed incompatible, dangerous even.
And Descartes steps right into the middle of this.
He does. And his big move, really, was recognizing that putting God and reason together in the same room, well, it was explosive at that moment. They destroy each other.
So survival was the main goal.
Absolutely. Early modern philosophy was about survival. So he sets up what our sources call a shelter, a safe space, specifically for reason.
But not cutting ties completely?
No, that's key. It wasn't about divorce. It was more like a pragmatic separation. Think of it like giving them separate apartments so they stop fighting and maybe eventually could coexist peacefully.
So he's not trying to get rid of God, but to give reason its own independent foundation.
Precisely. And that foundation is his famous, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. He finds this one point of certainty, the thinking self, that doesn't need God or the church to validate it.
That's the independent plot of land, so to speak.
Exactly. Reason can stand on its own 2 feet. Then, once reason is secure, maybe we can build a bridge back to God, figure out the external world. But that initial separation, that's really the start of modern thought. It's fundamentally pragmatic.
Okay, so reason gets its shelter. Now, fast forward about a century. The Enlightenment. This shelter isn't just a shelter anymore, is it?
No way. It's become this grand, sprawling mansion. The House of Reason is booming. Science, rationality, empirical evidence, this is where all the action is.
And the old House of Religion.
It's still there, but looking diminished, less central. The spotlight is definitely on the House of Reason. But, big houses can get messy, lots of people using reason, but maybe not always agreeing. It needs some rules.
Right. Which brings us to Immanuel Kant, the great architect of the Enlightenment, you could say.
That's a perfect description. He looked at this huge, bustling House of Reason and thought, okay, we need order, we need laws, we need clear boundaries.
How did he do that? What was his architectural plan?
It was ingenious, really. A 2-family house. First, he established the laws within the main House of Reason, the categories of understanding how our minds structure reality. This made it safe and functional for science and logic.
Okay, so he brings order to reason's domain, but what about faith? Did he just board up the windows of the old house?
No, and this is crucial. He recognized that faith, or at least morality, still had a necessary place. So he didn't kick it out entirely. He built a kind of detached structure, an annex.
An annex, separate from the main house.
Yes, specifically for religion, morality, things beyond empirical proof. This annex contained what Kant called the thing in itself, the reality beyond our senses and reason, the world as it really is, which he argued we simply cannot know directly.
So faith gets its own little quiet space, but reason is told not to trespass.
Pretty much. Kant said, look, residents of the House of Reason, stick to what you can know through experience and logic. Don't try to break into the annex. That space, the thing in itself, is where concepts like God, freedom, immortality could reside, but not as objects of knowledge.
Wait, if we can't know anything in the annex, how did Kant justify morality or God? Was it just wishful thinking? A noble lie to keep society stable?
That's the subtlety. He wasn't saying it's just a useful fiction. He argued that while we can't prove God, freedom, or immortality using theoretical reason, the tools of the main house, our practical reason, our moral compass, compels us to act as if they are real.
So morality is the key to the annex door.
In a way, yes. Our innate sense of duty, the categorical imperative act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. That feeling points towards this noumenal realm, the thing in itself, We live by reason's laws, but our moral life operates with respect to this unseen annex.
A functional coexistence, then. Reason runs the day-to-day. Faith handles the deeper questions, but they keep to their own spaces.
Exactly. A very carefully managed two-family house, centered on reason, but acknowledging the necessity of the annex, kept apart by strict rules.
Okay, but we know these careful boundaries didn't last. We hit the turn of the 19th century, German idealism, and things get, well, dramatic.
They really do. Kant's successors, the Romantics and Idealists, looked at his neat structure and basically said, this is too restrictive. Why build a wall around the most interesting part?
They wanted access to the annex.
They stormed the annex. Fichte looked into the thing in itself and declared he saw the self, the absolute ego, the very engine of reality. Schelling peered in and found not just an unknowable void, but the living beauty of nature, an expression of the absolute.
So they're breaking down Kant's walls, expanding reason's territory right into that forbidden zone.
Precisely. They felt Kant had been too timid. Reason, they argued, could grasp the ultimate reality. But the really decisive move comes with Hegel.
Right. Hegel wasn't just peeking into the annex, was he?
Hegel brought in the demolition crew. He completely removed the annex, tore it down. For Hegel, the House of Reason had to be totalizing. Everything had to be integrated into one single rational system.
So he drags religion out of its separate dwelling and forces it into the main House of Reason.
Exactly. Religion wasn't this separate, unknowable thing anymore. It became a stage in the development of reason itself, a necessary part of how the absolute spirit comes to understand itself through history.
Wow. So what happens to God or religion in Hegel's system? Where does it sit now? Definitely not on the throne.
Absolutely not the throne. Think of it as being moved to the lower seat. Religion becomes a kind of servant to reason. It's important historically, a crucial chapter in the story of spirit self-realization, but it's ultimately superseded by philosophy, by reason fully understanding itself.
God becomes a follower, not the master of the house.
A follower, a historical artifact, maybe even just data point in reason's grand synthesis. Hegel makes reason the absolute, undisputed monarch. The system is seemingly complete, rational, all-encompassing.
A perfect, rational palace, and then, barely a generation later, along comes Nietzsche.
Yeah. Enter Nietzsche, maybe with a can of petrol, as you said earlier.
He looks at Hegel's grand palace of reason and famously declares,
God is dead. But here's the crucial insight our sources highlight. Nietzsche realized that killing God wasn't enough. He saw that the entire House of Reason built by Kant and perfected by Hegel, with its big ideas like objective truth, universal goodness, absolute beauty, was just the old religious structure in disguise.
just ghosts of God haunting a supposedly secular building.
Exactly. These grand metaphysical concepts were just shadows, remnants, psychological projections of the dead God. So if you're going to tear down the idol, you have to tear down the temple built in its image too.
So Nietzsche's fire wasn't just aimed at theology.
It was aimed at the entire foundation of Western metaphysics. He burned down the House of Reason itself. Truth, goodness, beauty, all just comforting illusions, props left over from the old faith.
Devastating. What did he think was left in the ashes? If God is dead and reason is a ruin.
Only life. Raw, chaotic, untamed, value-creating, eternally flowing life-laden. This dynamic, often painful but fundamentally creative force was the only reality left standing.
Okay, so the house is rubble, God is dead, reason is suspect. This sounds like, well, chaos. How did philosophy even proceed from there?
It was definitely a moment of profound disorientation, intellectual freefall, as you put it earlier. But the first sort of green shoots in the philosophical landscape came from trying to understand that very life Nietzsche pointed to. Henri Bergson is key here.
Bergson, he tried to make sense of this raw life.
Yes, he took Nietzsche's somewhat poetic notion and tried to give it philosophical rigor. He saw life not as something static that reason could pin down, but as continuous dynamic flow, what he called duration, durée, and the force driving this flow, the vital impulse, élan vital.
So finding order within change, not imposing a rigid structure on it, a kind of flexible life sensibility.
Exactly. It was a move away from static blueprints and towards understanding the inherent creativity and constant becoming of existence.
But despite Bergson's focus on flow, the 20th century didn't just embrace flexibility, did it? It feels like there was still this deep urge to find something solid, some replacement for the old house.
Oh, absolutely. The search for a unifying principle, a substitute for God, a comprehensive whole, didn't just disappear with Nietzsche's fire. The 20th century is almost a catalog of attempts to build new totalizing systems, new houses.
Right, we saw so many attempts. You had Marxism with its idea of an inevitable historical law driving everything.
Yep. Or scientism, trying to elevate natural law to the position of the ultimate final arbiter of all truth.
Then there was phenomenology, digging deep into consciousness structure, hoping to find the universal foundation there.
Existentialism, focusing on radical individual meaning as the only anchor in a meaningless cosmos. And structuralism, looking for the hidden social or linguistic orders that dictate everything beneath the surface.
It seems like a frantic search. What was the common thread? Why did all these powerful, seemingly comprehensive systems ultimately feel inadequate? Why did they collapse or lose favor?
That's the fascinating insight, isn't it? The realization, perhaps looking back, is that the very act of searching for the whole, that single, all-explaining, unifying principle, was itself a kind of hangover from theism. It was a ritual unconsciously designed to recall God.
Wow, so even when they thought they were being secular or scientific, they were still looking for that God-shaped hole.
Essentially, yes. They were all, in their own way, metaphysical quests for the final, singular truth, the master key. Whether it was history, science, consciousness, or structure didn't matter. They failed because they were still playing the old architectural game, assuming there must be a single center, a single foundation. The very thing Nietzsche argued was an illusion.
So by the time we get to the late 20th century, there's this sense of exhaustion,
The
postmodern fatigue.
complete exhaustion. People were tired of the grand promises and the inevitable collapses. This is where you get thinkers like Lyotard declaring the end of grand narratives. No one really believed in those big, overarching stories anymore.
And Derrida talking about a structure lacking a center.
Exactly. The center couldn't hold because perhaps there never was one. And Baldrauer speaks of the disappearance of reality itself, as the shared, centralized narratives that propped it up dissolved into simulations and fragments.
So people just started living in the fragments
Yeah,
without a map.
pretty much. An acceptance, maybe reluctant, of fragmentation, of local truths, of living without that single unifying blueprint, a kind of directionless drift, some would say.
Which brings us finally to the 21st century. If postmodernism was about recognizing the lack of a center, what comes next? This leads us to object-oriented ontology, OO, and new realism.
Right. These movements emerge out of that very drift, that acceptance of fragmentation, and they make a statement that sounds simple but is profoundly radical. It goes something like this. All beings are real, however the world does not exist.
Okay, let's unpack that. All beings are real. What does that mean in practice? Oh, sounds a bit technical.
It's about radical democracy among objects, you could almost say. It means we need to stop putting humans at the center of everything. Uos as a coffee cup, a political idea, a black hole, a squirrel. They are all equally real. They exist independently of us, with their own hidden depths and realities that we can never fully grasp.
It's a deep pluralism. Everything gets its own reality status.
Everything. No hierarchy, where humans are on top interpreting everything else.
Okay, but then the second part. The world does not exist. If all these beings are real, how can the world not exist? Isn't the world just the collection of all beings?
But world here means something specific. It means that overarching container, that single coherent system or narrative that supposedly hold all these diverse beings together in one neat package.
So the world is like the final alias for God, the ultimate organizing principle.
Exactly. It's the last ghost of that totalizing impulse. To say the world does not exist is the final step in exercising what the sources call the curse of God, that deep-seated philosophical compulsion to find the one system, the one explanation, the one house that fits everything.
So removing the world means accepting that reality is just. This collection of countless unique, real things that don't necessarily fit into one big story.
Precisely. It's freedom from the need for a single unifying truth. Everything just is, in its own way.
This sounds philosophically liberating, maybe, but politically. What does this mean for how we organize society? If there's no single world or truth, how does democracy function?
This is where it gets really interesting and, I think, relevant. This philosophy implies a very specific kind of democracy, not a weak, anything-goes relativism, but a strong democracy.
Strong in what sense?
Strong in the sense that it demands the courage to reject ideologies that try to erase the reality of others. If the fundamental nature of reality is plural, all beings are real, then our political structures must fiercely protect that pluralism.
Because the danger is always the rise of totalitarianism, right? Which always insists on a single truth. One ideology, one race, one party that gets to define reality and cancel out everything else.
Exactly. Totalitarianism needs that single, overarching, world concept to justify itself.
Right.
Ooh, or new realism offers a direct counter. Okay, your truth, your ideology, it's real. It exists as a being. But you have absolutely no right to erase other beings, other realities.
So the political task shifts dramatically. It's not about finding the one true way forward for everyone.
No. It's about managing the inevitable coexistence of countless different real perspectives and ways of being. It's about building structures that allow for this multiplicity without letting any single one dominate and annihilate the others.
The goal becomes what one source calls the order of countless existences. Maybe like the Japanese concept of Yayorozu 8 million gods, or just countless entities coexisting.
That's a great analogy. It's an order based on recognizing and respecting inherent difference, not on forcing unity under a single banner. That's the potential political shape emerging from this 21st century philosophy.
What a journey, seriously. From Descartes building a small, safe shelter for reason next door to faith.
To Kant designing that careful, rule-bound two-family house with its separate annex.
Then Hegel crashing the party, tearing down the annex and forcing everyone into one big, reason-dominated structure.
Followed by Nietzsche burning the whole thing down, declaring God dead and reason as ghost, leaving only chaotic life.
And after a century of trying and failing to rebuild a single grand structure, we arrive here, in a place with no central blueprint.
A world that has consciously, deliberately let go of the need for a center. God, reason, the state, the world itself, none are accepted as the single unifying force anymore. Instead, it's just everything existing, each thing real in its own unique way.
And this inherent diversity, this acceptance of multiplicity born from the ashes of those grand systems, is described as the quiet strength of our current moment.
It's not loud or declarative like the old systems, but it's perhaps more resilient because it doesn't rely on one single point of failure.
So, for you listening, here's the thought we want to leave you with today. If you truly accept this idea that your beliefs, your truths are real, but they don't give you the right to erase or deny the reality of others, how does that change things? How does embracing this order of countless existences alter how you approach disagreement, conflict, or just understanding the sheer diversity of the world around you right now?
Something to think about, definitely, as we navigate this, well, fundamentally decentralized reality.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.